and welcome to the House of Wellness, and welcome to March, which this year is a day later than usual.
Which means a big happy birthday for all the 29th of February babies, because of course 2024 is a leap year, which means that the millions of people all around the world who are born in a leap year means they get to celebrate their birthday on their actual day.
and leap years come about because it actually takes the year a little bit more than 365 days to orbit the sun. And without that extra day every 4 years, things like calendars, seasons would get all out of sync, and then planting, harvesting, all kinds of things would be affected.
And you know that is the one day of the year that women are allowed to propose marriage. Now, of course, Joe and Jack, you can do that anytime you like. I can feel the heat coming my way. But it is a tradition that dates back to the 5th century Ireland around marriage proposals.
I'm not sure any women are going to be taking that up. Maybe we need to study into that, Dr. Nick. But actually in Greece, it's considered bad luck to marry all year in a leap year.
And speaking of hookups, our focus today is on sex and all its forms, and particularly the need for young people to protect themselves against STIs.
Yeah, and of course, sexually transmitted infections have been around forever, Joe, but we GPs have recently seen this big spike. So we'll be looking at the reasons behind that and also at the big push helping to prevent it.
Another big push, Nick, is for parents wanting sex education in schools at a younger age. We're going to hear from an expert on that a little bit later on the show.
Heinzie checks into a heavenly head spa and why 2024 skincare is all about getting back to basics the natural way.
Well, someone who always brings an amazing natural energy is star of the stage, Lucy Durack. She always is so positive on stage and off, I think.
And now she's letting us tap into the secrets of her sunny outlook on life in her new mental health app, Hey Lemonade.
Lucy, most people would know you from your incredible performances in Wicked and Legally Blonde, but you have a little side hustle cheering people up.
Yes, I do. It's a side hustle that quite quickly became essentially a full-time job, but happily so. So my friend Elise McCann and I, we were both on the apps, like meditation and wellness apps, and they were just taking a lot of time that we didn't have. And we'd gone for a walk and had a chat, and we're like, I think this is what we need. We just need like a quick chat with a friend, like ideally a friend with a science degree or a psychology degree, to just say, this is what you should do, it's going to be okay, and give us some actual pragmatic, practical advice. And we were like, so it's like a pep talk. That must exist. And it didn't exist. We looked everywhere. And so we're like, we'll make it ourselves. So that's what we've done. We've made Hey Lemonade, which is an evidence-based pep talk app.
So what's the basic premise of the app?
So Hey Lemonade is filled with hundreds of short pep talks. They're all 3 to 4 minutes long. They're all based in evidence, and they're all delivered in a number of voices, so you can choose how you hear your support. We have Tony Armstrong, we have Maggie Beer, we have an ex-SAS and Navy SEALs trainer called Chief Brabon, in case you need like a bit of a kick into action.
You, I would say, are one of the sunniest disposition I've ever spent time with. You're naturally cheery to me. But you also work in a very stressful industry and a pretty stressful job at times. I wonder, was there something behind the scenes for you that led you to feel like you needed this?
Yeah, there really was. It really kind of came into fruition when COVID hit and I was playing Princess Fiona in Shrek, the musical.
One of my favourites. Loved it.
Me too. Lots of farting and burping. And COVID hit and our entire industry was decimated. And I often think the inklings have come many times when before that even, when I've just been stressed about things, and I often just Google my symptoms. Like I remember once.
Everyone does that, by the way.
Good. I'm glad it's not just me. I was like, stressed mother, expressing milk, working full time. And I was rehearsing Shrek. And I ended up getting through this maternal health nurse. And she's just said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm expressing. When are you expressing? And I told her, what are you doing? You're working, 6 days a week? What? Well, that's stupid. Don't do that. They're going to set you up for failure. Like, don't do that. Just give yourself a break. And she just gave me really pragmatic advice. And I think of that often, and I think that is what I want this app to be, is where somebody, because sometimes you do just need someone to tell you what to do. As much as we try not to tell each other what to do, sometimes you just, when you're in a moment of stress, you need someone to go, don't do that. That's not going to help you in this moment. You might want to come back to that later, but don't do that now.
What is your hope for someone who wakes up in the morning and might be feeling a little bit blah?
Our hope is that no matter what you might search, you will find a pep talk that will help you in your day. And so on top of the feeling of being pepped, you'll also just feel like you're not alone. So you'll see something and you'll think, oh, well, if somebody's felt that before, somebody's made that pep talk, I'm not the only one who's felt that before, and hopefully you'll feel less alone. We have talks that can motivate you and help you get out of bed in the morning, things like a double shot morning high five or a chill morning high five, or help you through the day, 3 p.m. freshen up, or talks that will help you with in-the-moment stress, like a public, if you've got public speaking jitters, or if you're feeling like we've got an imposter syndrome antidote, or can't stop crying.
Explain the evidence, because I know that you've spent a lot of time and work in there.
We have an amazing team of psychologists, including one of the best coaching psychologists in the country. He briefs all of the writers on what we have, and we've got a structure that we use and that we stick to, because we know that that's what works. And on top of that, we had the CSIRO do some testing, and we found that the people who did the trial with the CSIRO of Hey Lemonade at the end of the 4 weeks, they were found to be 50% calmer and have a significant increase in their feelings of positive energy and vitality, and a significant decrease in their perceptions of daily hassles.
Amazing. What an incredible result.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
We all cried tears of relief, because nobody wants to make pep talks that don't work. So we're like, they work.
Joe and Jacqui, I'm a fan of the idea that when you get served a big plate of lemons, you can always turn them into lemonade.
Absolutely. It worked for Beyonce. She turned her own tough time into her so-called revenge album. I don't know if you listened to Lemonade.
Not really my thing.
Oh, it was my best. It was awesome, and it went #1 worldwide.
I love that sense of empowerment. And speaking of empowerment, today's youngsters, well, they're so much more open about sex, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. They talk about it more openly. They explore lots of different avenues. They just really own it in a beautiful way, I think, and vastly different to my day. I've got to say, it was very much taboo to talk about sex, especially with your parents.
Absolutely.
Joe, you think back to the 80s, there was a few layers around being sexually active in that period, with the AIDS epidemic being a real problem. I think what it did, though, is introduce a generation to the need to use condoms for protection at the same time.
There is, unfortunately, now, though, a growing sense of complacency. And here's Dr. Nick with information about the rise of STIs.
They used to be known as VD, or venereal diseases. Venereal after Venus, the goddess of love. These days, we talk about STIs, or sexually transmitted infections. A little less poetic, but perhaps more to the point. Now, while the name may have changed, the diseases themselves have stayed pretty much the same. And they've been around a very long time. Syphilis and gonorrhea were recorded over 2,000 years ago or more. Prior to the modern era, treatments were either ineffective, brutal, or both. Syphilis, for example, was treated with the highly toxic heavy metal mercury, which was often applied directly to the affected areas. Ouch! Not very effective treatment, and occasionally fatal for the patient. It was often said, one night with Venus, a lifetime with Mercury. Fortunately, after the Second World War, the arrival of penicillin meant that both these diseases became treatable. Unfortunately, this led to a certain degree of overconfidence, and combined with the sexual revolution of the 60s, the other STIs became more widespread, things like chlamydia, genital herpes, and the wart virus, HPV. Then in the 1980s, along came HIV and AIDS, which for many years were untreatable and inevitably fatal. Fortunately, advances in modern medicine has meant that HIV is now, for most people, a manageable long-term illness. But the arrival of HIV meant that safer sex practices became more widely used. But in recent years, the public seemed to have developed a bit of overconfidence again, and we're seeing an increase in the usual diseases. And because they may not have symptoms at the start, you may not know if you or your partner are carrying them, which is why getting tested is so crucial. So please make sure you get vaccinated against things like HPV and hepatitis A and B, have regular sexual health checks, and always discuss safer sex with your partners. Oh, and always have some condoms handy just in case.
Condoms all the way, Das. And as Dr. Nick said, keep up to date with those STI tests and jabs.
Always a slightly awkward conversation, Joe, but an important message, and it's one that...
Not with me, not at all.
It's like old family with you, Joe. But it's one that dating apps themselves are now pushing really strongly. We'll find out how right after a break on the House of Wellness.
Sexual health is a big topic, Dr. Nick, especially for young people. And one initiative I'm particularly thrilled about is the HPV vaccine is free and available in schools across Australia.
Yeah, and Australia really is leading the world with this, Joe. HPV is the human papillomavirus, and it's the cause of pretty much every case of cervical cancer. And since the rollout of this national vaccine programme, 2007, we've seen a whopping 92% reduction in cases of HPV. And, you know, if we keep going at this rate, we could see the eradication of cervical cancer within a decade.
Other countries are doing amazing things also. Scotland rolled out a similar program in 2008, and a recent study has shown zero cervical cancer in women who received that vaccine aged 12 and 13. Amazing.
It is amazing. Cervical cancer is the fourth most common cancer in women. So the idea we might eradicate it is just, it really is incredible.
Well, 1 in 6 Australians will get an STI in their lifetime, so being safe and responsible is what sex looks like in 2024. And we're better to push that message than on the apps where people do their dating.
When it comes to sexual behaviour, it's a complex issue that involves a lot of different factors. So we know that young people learn about sex through watching porn. They're not learning about pleasure and how sex works through sex education a lot of the time. So they look at porn, and porn doesn't really depict the use of condoms or dental dams. And so, this sets the scene. This sets up a sexual script that doesn't include safety, right? And often doesn't include consent or mutual pleasure either. And what that means is that when they're having sexual experiences, they're prioritising what feels good rather than the safety of the other person, the needs of the other person, and potentially their own safety.
So can you describe for me, what is the stigma surrounding STI? What does it feel like? How does that play out?
So a lot of people will talk about STIs being associated with being dirty or having some sort of moral judgment attached to it. We know, or that it's only for people who have lots of sex. But in reality, you can have sexual contact once and contract an STI. You can be in a monogamous relationship and contract an STI. So really, it's so important that we work towards normalising the discussion of STIs and that we reduce the shame and stigma attached to talking about them.
So we have this new campaign. What's your take on it?
So research indicates that when we are conducting campaigns to promote testing for STIs, it's actually less effective to focus on fear and risk and more effective to prioritise and represent pleasure as part of the campaign. And so what I think this campaign does really well is it puts testing in the context of a sexual pleasurable relationship. So that's depicted within the ad. If we think about some of the campaigns in the 1980s, they were really fear-based. So they made people afraid of STIs. And when sex was talked about, it was talked about in relation to risk and fear. And as I mentioned, we know that that's not actually effective in the long term if we're looking at sexual health holistically, rather than just, reducing people from having sex, which is not the way forward.
So how are dating apps involved in the messaging?
Yeah, so part of the new government campaign includes messaging on some of the most common dating apps, which is fantastic. So we know that a lot of young people are meeting people and having sex through dating apps. And so bringing testing to the forefront of their mind and prompting people that this can be part of the initial conversations that they have with someone before they have sex is permitted, and important. By having conversations, by bringing it to the forefront, if we think about chlamydia, gonorrhea and syphilis, they're all treatable by antibiotics. So as long as people are getting tested regularly, they can pick it up and they can get treated.
These two feel pretty stoked right now. Is it because they just had great sex? Or because they used a condom? Was it the chilling before that? Or because it felt like the perfect match? Maybe. Or maybe they felt safe doing the best part because they regularly do the test part. Yeah, that's it. Make STI testing your before play. Authorised by the Australian Government, Canberra.
Hey, Nick, I generally take a bit more of a relaxed approach to exercise these days. I do a little bit of yoga, ride the spin bike a couple of times a week with some mates, a few weights, all pretty lightweight stuff, but I try and do something every day. But have you heard about this new fitness trend called cozy cardio, where you're pampering yourself, I believe, as you're trying to get fit?
Yeah, well, you wouldn't normally think the words pamper and exercise go together in the same sentence. But, you know, it's all about rejecting this idea that exercise has to be intense and strenuous. Instead, you're going to light a candle, make a smoothie or a cuppa, and then you're going to binge watch your favourite show while you just do some gentle treadmill walking, do some stretches, yoga, just whatever you fancy.
Got to admit, there is some appeal. That sounds pretty nice, Nick.
Yeah, well, exactly does. And the idea is that if you do it gently like that, a la this cosy cardio, you're more likely to keep it up. I have to say, the only thing that gets me on that rowing machine is being able to watch something at the same time.
With a bit of pain at the same time, Nick. One thing we talk about a lot here on the House of Wellness is the need for men like us to look after our mental health better. And I think part of it, Nick, is actually giving ourselves permission to take the time to look after ourselves. And as always, Luke Hines is ahead of the curve.
Picture this, a serene sanctuary where stress just melts away and every worry is swept aside by the gentle hands of a skilled artisan. Imagine experiencing a head massage that releases tension you didn't even know you had. Well, I'm about to experience the latest sensation to hit Australia. The Japanese head spa is not just about pampering your hair, but about nourishing your soul too.
The Japanese head spa is a combination of massage techniques and thoroughly cleansing the scalp to create a highly relaxing environment for our clients. When a client comes in, we'll start with a consultation, so a thorough scalp consultation. During that time, we go through any sort of concerns the client may be having with their scalp and hair, or whether it's just for pure relaxation or not. We focus on, sense, smell, obviously touch with the massage and various different tools. I think the favourite is going to be definitely the way the water is going to be running all over your scalp and on your neck. That's my favourite part for sure. Feels like you're laying under a waterfall. It's just the most relaxing feeling in the world. So we do a scalp exfoliation treatment, a double cleanse of the scalp, deep mask and conditioning as well. We have a steam pod that clients lay under for a couple of minutes, and then the viral water ring therapy as well.
Is it a particular style of massage that you use on the body?
So we just use more of a Swedish relaxation massage, so very slow, very steady. We don't do any sort of pressing into the bones or into the skin or anything like that. We like to really focus on every inch of the scalp, face and neck and décolletage. But with the scalp, we're turning the head around during the treatment, so we're able to get the front, the sides and the back of the nape of the neck. So you're going to feel it all over your head.
I feel very fortunate that I'm holding onto my hair for now. But do I have to have hair? Are there people who have male pattern baldness, alopecia, maybe another health or skin condition where they don't have any hair, but they're still coming to a Japanese head spa?
Oh, most definitely. So I have got clients that do have those sorts of conditions. And again, we don't discriminate. Everyone can experience the Japanese head spa. We just tailor different products for them. For example, we can use more of a face and beard cleanser on the scalp instead of just shampoos. Most people just want to come just to experience that massage and the way the water is running on their scalp. So everyone should be able to experience it no matter, whether they're hair or no hair, doesn't matter.
Are you seeing a good mix between men and women?
Definitely. I mean, we always want to invite more males into the studio. I think wellness has been such a thing for females over such a long period of time. But I think, there is a growing rate of males that want to experience self-care nowadays. And it's so exciting because I think men can really, really benefit from this treatment.
It's not as simple as a beauty treatment, is it, though? It's about achieving inner health and harmony.
Most definitely. I think the number one thing for me starting this was to be able to provide my clients with that sense of love and, just indulgence.
How important is self-care?
Self-care is so important. I think from day to day, everyone has so many stresses that go on in our day-to-day lives, and we don't actually take that time to, de-stress and put time into ourselves. It's a time for us to reflect and, let go of a lot of things that are going on in our minds that no one else can see and hear about. So just to have that moment with yourself is so important.
If I'm totally honest, my favourite part about getting my hair cut is that moment that they wash your hair and give you that quick little massage. Well, the Japanese head spa experience is exactly like that, but on a completely different level. It is elevated in every single way. You completely switch off your mind while you've got that incredible sensation of touch, not just on your scalp, but also on your chest and arms. And it is completely sensory with feel, touch, smell. Everything is so calming. If you're looking at an alternative style of massage that is also therapeutic for the mind and the hair, then the Japanese head spa is for you.
Oh, sign me up for that head massage. At the hairdresser, my favourite part is definitely the scalp massage. Coming up, why parents are calling for sex education to start earlier in schools. As a mum, I'm very interested in the take on that one. We're back after this.
Jack, earlier in the show, Dr. Nick Carr shed some light for us on sexual health, particularly for young people. And one of the big issues facing us as parents is the easy access to online graphic porn that our kids have got. It's a pretty challenging topic.
Oh, you are so right, Darcy. It really is shaping the views of today's kids on sex and sexuality. And the reality is they're exposed to so much more of this online at a much younger age too. So that's why I guess it's so important to talk about it with them.
It's a pretty awkward conversation to have with our kids, let's be honest with you. But the experts are telling us that transparent, open communication on this topic is really the only way forward.
You try to monitor what your kids are watching and looking at all online, but it's so hard as a parent.
And Jack, most schools are holding off the sexual health education until about year 9 or 10, but there's a big push now from parents to start that education a lot earlier.
We discovered that Australian parents are highly supportive of schools delivering relationships and sexuality education. So over 90% of parents actually had an expectation that these sorts of topics should be covered by schools. What was surprising actually was that quite a number wanted certain topics to be covered in grades 7 and 8. And we do know traditionally a lot of schools will wait until years 9, 10 or even later to tackle some of these topics for the first time. Teachers are really good at adapting materials, and one of the common techniques they might use is something like an anonymous question box where all of the students in the class can ask questions comfortably, and that gives the teacher a really good background insight into what students might be wanting to learn more about. And it can be all sorts of things about their bodies, particularly around periods and menstruation, tampons. It could be a word that they've heard at lunchtime or from an older sibling, for example. It really could be anything, and it does give the teacher some good insight into some gaps in knowledge. At the very beginning, we want to teach young people to be able to name their body parts and to be able to talk about these body parts without shame. As they move towards the later years of primary school, we're teaching them about puberty, and then we move through to secondary school where there's a whole range of additional topics that we're going to cover. How to be really critical consumers of online spaces and online media, how to engage respectfully with their peers and manage changing friendship groups, through to those real basics of sex education. So learning how to use condoms and other barrier methods, the old condoms on bananas, for example, through to all the different contraceptive methods that are available. So we do find young people telling us all the time that if the education hasn't been great at home or at school, then they will get their sex education typically online, which can be quite scary because there's a whole range of information out there and most of it is not very accurate. And they'll also go to their siblings and to their peer groups to help answer questions as well. So all of a sudden they're getting access to heaps of different information that might not be credible and is pretty unstructured. So that's why it's really important that both homes and schools work in unison to give young people a really good grounding. I don't think parents necessarily want schools to play a bigger role, but there is absolutely an expectation that they will lift part of the load. So parents don't want to be the only educators. I think definitely we need a partnership approach where both schools and homes are working in unison. And we know from talking to parents that they just want a bit of a heads up about what's happening in schools so that they can be adequately prepared for the questions that might come home. Because let's be honest, it's a little bit awkward for some of us. Most parents I've spoken to really value the opportunity that's presented to them, because if a school's already started these topics, it just makes it a little less awkward.
These two feel pretty stoked. Is it because they just had great sex? Or is it because they felt safe doing the best part by regularly doing the test part? Make STI testing your before play. Authorised by the Australian Government, Canberra.
You know, Jack, the internet makes sex so much more difficult to navigate than when we were younger, so it's fantastic that schools are covering that education.
Agree. Today, Jo, on another note, we are here in one of our favourite garden locations, Ripponlea. And did you know that indoor plants are way more beneficial than we thought?
Well, you know, Jack, NASA were way ahead of the curve on this one. They were right across the air-purifying effects of indoor plants in the 80s, and now the latest science shows that indoor plants can actually reduce blood pressure and stress as well. It's amazing.
It is. They really do have a calming effect. And you know what? It's been proven that they actually reduce the stress hormone cortisol in us. Maybe that's why people that work in nurseries, gardeners, they're so chilled and calm.
They really are. Among the best rated for well-being are the mother-in-law's tongue or snake plant, the peace lily for obvious reasons, and the spectacular rubber plant. I think because it's very difficult to kill them. Although I'm sure
I need one of those.
I was going to say I would find a way.
Well, 2024 trends are all about low maintenance and minimalism, and it's not just in the garden. The latest skincare trend is all about getting back to basics.
Skinimalism is my favourite trend because as a dermatologist, I see a huge number of patients with really upset, angry, irritated skin from having used too many skincare products that they've often bought online. It's probably one of the most common misconceptions that you need to spend thousands of dollars on skincare and have a skincare regimen that really fills your entire cupboard. We really recommend keeping things simple, having a basic cleanser that's hydrating, a really good quality moisturiser, broad spectrum SPF sunscreen to be used most days of the year, and only 1 or 2 active ingredients that have got good research behind them to promote skin luminosity and anti-aging effects. When establishing a skin routine, I think one of the most important things is to understand your skin types and skin needs. You don't need to simply copy your favourite influencer or, speak to a friend or family about what they've used. It's about understanding how your skin feels on a day-to-day basis, any skin conditions that you may have, and your budget. A really big piece of advice is to use one product at a time and introduce it into your daily regimen very slowly or gradually, so that if you do develop irritation, you know exactly which product has caused it.
So having done all my makeup training in freezing London, I had to quickly adapt how I apply makeup living in Australia. We need sweat-proof makeup, so we need sprays, powders, matte primers, the list goes on and on. What's the role of setting products? Well, it's self-explanatory. It's to set that makeup so it goes nowhere regardless of the weather. Things like a setting spray is going to set your makeup and lock it in. However, depending on your skin type. So if you're more oily, I'd say use a compact powder and stay away from the setting sprays. I find the setting sprays sometimes can have alcohol in them and make me a little dry. If you're someone super dry and you need that hydration, go for the setting sprays. Brooke, I'm loving this bronzed makeup that we've achieved. Is this your go-to?
Yes, it's my favourite. Always go for this look.
I think the one thing we do need to do, though, is lock this in because depending on weather, you could sweat it off or it could get super oily, right? I love to give a little mist, so always hold it back quite far and almost do it in a circular motion. And then just fan that through because what it does is it doesn't leave any clumpy bits of the spray on your makeup at all. The next thing is after you've got your spray on and your skin is a little damp, go in with a compact powder. This one in particular is a natural beige finish and with a small brush. This is the key. And I think using the little brush gives you just control and also your face is not big. So use something smaller that you can control where the powder goes. Also, not too much because we need just enough powder to mattify it, but obviously not mask your skin or your makeup. That is looking good. Right amount of coverage, matte in the right areas, and it's going to lock it in so you don't sweat it off.
Perfect.
Depending solely on a powder or a spray to lock in your makeup isn't enough. However, things like primers, what types of foundation you're wearing, so is that foundation matte, is that foundation long wear? All these things are really going to add to keeping your makeup on your face.
It's not easy navigating the world of technology with our kids and juggling time spent playing outside with time on devices inside. Our family has a rescue Kelpie Harry and my two girls love playing with him. And it's long been thought that having a pet in the household can lead to increased physical activity in children. But there's been no research to prove that until now. The positive influence of dog ownership starts in early childhood. It's not just about kids being more active, but on how they play as well. Kids play differently with dogs in unstructured ways, like going to the park, doing zoomies around the backyard, taking the dog for a walk, or just mucking around doing fun things with their pooch. But here's a surprise. The results of the study show there is a difference between the sexes. In fact, girls increase their activity in games by almost an hour a day, which explains why my girls play so much with our dog. That doesn't mean you should rush out and buy a pet if you don't have one, because anyone who's got a dog knows they are a lot of work. But it is useful information if you do have children and they don't spend as much time playing with their pet as they should. So get them outside and moving and they'll reap the benefits.
It's not safe to be taking expired medications. Often what will happen is you'll have a change to a dose of medication or the medication you're just stopping completely. And it could be expired and you look at the date and you're like, 2012? Where have you been storing it? And also, have you taken any of it? It does potentially increase side effects. The other thing to think about is it can decrease the effectiveness of the medication after it's expired, so it may simply not work. Keeping it at home can be unsafe, and if you dispose of it incorrectly, it can be harmful to the environment. So when in doubt, come into the pharmacy. That pharmacist can safely dispose of it. What I would recommend telling the pharmacist exactly what you're bringing back into the pharmacy, because some medications need to be disposed of separately. It's really not advisable to stop taking your medication, even if you start to feel better. If you have an acute illness, for example, an infection, you want to make sure that you're treating the whole course. Otherwise, there could be the likelihood of resistance occurring. If it's a chronic condition, for example, if you start to feel better and you're on antidepressants, it means that the medication is working, which is all the more reason that you should continue. Walking, cycling, even cooking dinner. Sometimes we can't avoid a cut or a graze, so it's important to understand how to care for a wound to ensure a speedy recovery. One of the best things to do for fast healing is to cover the wound with a dressing after first cleaning the area from any debris.
A good quality dressing helps manage moisture levels. Not too much moisture that it may damage the skin, and not too little that the wound dries out. These ideal conditions help avoid long-term scarring. Not all dressings are created equal, so choose one that lasts up to 7 days so you don't disturb the wound by frequently changing the dressing. It should also be comfortable, waterproof so you can shower with ease, and bacteria-proof too, reducing the chance of infection. No one wants to live life trying to avoid accidents, but when they happen, taking a little bit of extra care with a wound can help make sure that any minor cut or graze doesn't leave a lasting mark on your body.
2 words, Das, Super Bowl. Now, I have no idea what goes on in that game, but the halftime entertainment is always so amazing. And this year, Usher was just incredible.
Well, it's the biggest one-day sporting event on the planet, Joe, and I'm obsessed with it. It was brilliant. It was something for everyone at this year's Super Bowl, whether you love the game, know nothing about it at all. The Kansas City Chiefs won back-to-back Super Bowls. The Taylor Swift factor was enormous. Her boyfriend, Travis Kelce, won his 3rd Super Bowl, and she's brought a whole new audience to the NFL, which was remarkable. And I think another story that maybe got lost a little bit is Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas itself, which is powered completely by renewable energy.
Amazing. It's the first time in Super Bowl history this has happened, and the green energy for the event came from a huge solar farm in the Nevada desert, not far away.
Yeah, the stadium opened in Las Vegas in 2020, and sustainability was right at the core of the whole project, which, Joe, is brilliant, and I'm sure the way to go for all stadiums in the future.
Well, we all know the power of going green, including Zoe Bingley-Pullen, who's here with a way to turn plants into meatballs.
When it comes to delivering both taste and nutrients, you can't go past my Asian-inspired sauerkraut with tofu balls. But you'll need some time for this one. Roughly chop around 3 cups of white cabbage. Sauerkraut has a distinct sour tang that I love to use either as a topping or as a side dish. Salt will kickstart the fermenting process. It pulls water out of the cabbage and creates a thriving environment for good bacteria. Fermented foods are full of vitamins, like vitamin K2. Combine all the flavours and let the jar sift for about a week. Keep it in a cool, dark spot and let out any excess air until it looks a little bit like this. Now onto the tofu balls. Blitz onion, garlic and tofu, combining all their fabulous flavours. I'm adding pine nuts to the mix to give that bit of crunch and complement the soft textures. Egg will help bind the tofu mixture. Fry on medium heat until they're golden brown. While the savoury flavours of the balls can stand alone, the tartness of the sauerkraut takes it to the next level. A dish worth waiting for. Yum. Get Nourish is brought to you by Swiss Wellness. Support strong, healthy bones and help maintain bone mineralisation with Swiss Ultiboost Vitamin K2.
Well, guys, I want to talk for a moment about the psychology of buying the perfect gift for someone. It turns out there's been a lot of research done into that consumer psychology about buying the perfect gift. Now, let me ask this to you, Joe. What constitutes the perfect gift for you?
Well, we have been talking about indoor plants today, actually, and I actually think they are the perfect gift, even though I can't keep them alive. I like to give them to people because we have too much stuff in our lives, right? Whereas a lovely little patch of green in someone's house, I think, is a beautiful gift.
Well, it turns out, Joe, the best way to buy the perfect and ideal gift for someone is actually to buy what they ask for. Now, that is a life-changing bit of advice. I'm going to listen to Beck a lot more often from now on.
Well, I agree with that. I always tell people what I want if they ask. I'm also a big fan of gift vouchers, especially if you forget and need a last-minute gift.
Well, you're spot on, Jack, because that study you mentioned, Darsh, showed that even though they might feel bad asking for it, people prefer money or gift cards. And the other heartening news for people who struggle to know what to give, people like me, is that people are less impressed by what something costs and more impressed by something practical that they can use.
They also found that if you put a lot of thought into a gift, it makes you feel closer to the person you're giving it to, even if they don't know. So it really is the thought that counts.
I'm with you, Joe. It is the thought that counts in terms of gift giving. Thanks to Dr. Nick, to Joe and to Jack. That's all we've got time for today on the House of Wellness.
Tune in to Luke Hines and Gerald Quigley on House of Wellness Radio every Sunday.
Thanks as always to our great friends at Chemist Warehouse. We'll see you next time.